Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm still fairly new here. A lot of people haven't subscribed just yet, which is just fine. I'm hoping that I do get some new subscribers pretty soon. I talk about a couple different things on my channel, and tonight I just could not sleep for the life of me. I just could not go to sleep. This topic was just heavy on my heart, and I wanted to talk about it while I could. So in August, I had a miscarriage, and for a while, I contemplated about whether or not I wanted to make an actual video to talk about this. I've actually made two videos and decided not to post those, but today it just seemed to be really heavy on my heart, and I needed to talk about it. Um, so like I said, in August, on the 25th, we lost our son due to a miscarriage. I was about 15 weeks pregnant, and I was super excited about being pregnant. It was a really big deal for me because I had been trying for so long and nothing had happened. So to finally get a positive pregnancy test was a big deal for me. And I'm not young. I mean, I'm young, but I'm not young. I'm 27 almost. So, in my mind, I kind of feel like my time was running out and I kind of needed to be a mom already. And I was, just in this really bad headspace. And all of my best friends were getting pregnant and having babies. And to be around all of that was a lot when, that's something that I wanted for so long. So I found out that I was pregnant this summer. I want to say it was July when I found out. No, I take that back. I found out in May, the end of May, I found out that I was pregnant, and I was like, great. So I was happy about that because I didn't think that it was possible. And once we found out, it just kind of seemed like everything changed right away. Um, all of these different emotions started to surface, and I was happy about it. And he was still in shock for a long time, even up until we saw the baby's first ultrasound. He was still like in shock, couldn't believe that it was actually happening and it was our time. But it was great for me. I had a lot of things that was going on with it being, my first pregnancy. I was sick a lot of throwing up, which kind of got on my nerves. But um, now that I'm not pregnant, I miss it. I do. I miss the feeling of being pregnant. I missed the attention that I got. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. So we found out in May. Super excited. We had our first ultrasound in June. So June the 6th was the first time we ever got to see our baby. Super, super exciting moment for me. I still have all of my ultrasound pictures. I never threw anything away. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So July was great. Everything was fine in July. And I wanna say in June, everything was fine in June, not in July. So July approaches and I started having bleeding, and it wasn't too heavy of a flow, but it was bleeding, and it was concerning to me because, like I said, this was my first pregnancy, and I didn't really know what to expect. So it was definitely concerning. So I called just about all the moms I knew, and I was all over Google and just trying to figure out, what I should do. So of course I go to the hospital and they tell me everything looks fine. So I'm like, great. So July continues to go on, and around this time, I am still having sex because I didn't think that that was an issue. But I noticed that every time after we had sex, I would experience bleeding like a day or two after. So I had gotten to the point so I was trying to like slow it down, and I was like, I really don't even want to, have sex at this point because I don't know if it's jeopardizing the baby's health. Um, so like I said, we're in July. July's going fine. There's bleeding throughout this month. And like I said, the doctor said everything was cool. So towards the end of July, I had a doctor's appointment on the 27th. I go to my doctor's appointment and everything, like I said, they said it's fine. My baby's heartbeat was at 151. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. My baby is strong. They were saying that my baby was measuring a little bit bigger than it should be, but that was okay. So I was okay with that information. I was ecstatic about that because I'm like, long as the baby is doing fine, I'm okay. Um, so, after that appointment, I didn't have to go back until August. So one night I'm just laying in my bed and I feel this really weird sharp pain in my stomach, and I'm trying not to freak out because I'm like, I don't been to the hospital from the time I found out I was pregnant up until August. I had been going back for every little thing that you could possibly think of. If I stubbed my toe, I was like, I need to go to the hospital. Like, it's serious. So I was trying not to be dramatic, if that made sense. But a lot of people was telling me, that's normal. This is your first baby. This is your first pregnancy. It's okay to have a lot of questions, but I still felt like I was being annoying, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'm in the bed and I feel this really, really crazy pain in my stomach. And right after this pain, there's like a gush of fluid that comes out of me. And in my mind, immediately, I'm like, I just peed on myself. I literally just pissed all over myself. So I jump up and I'm running to the bathroom. And my husband sees this going on and he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And so at this point, I'm not saying anything because I'm really not trying to freak him out because I don't know what's going on. So I get to the bathroom and this liquid is like running down my legs at this point. So it's everywhere. And I'm like, something is wrong. So I call the advice nurse and immediately she tells me it doesn't sound great. No one wants to hear that it doesn't sound great when you're pregnant and you have been trying for so long and you finally got pregnant and then the nurse tells you it's not looking good. So she tells me this and she says, well, just go and lay down for 20 minutes and see if the flow continues to come out. So I lay down. In the midst of me laying down, being pregnant, I dozed off. And I wake up to her calling my phone, which I'm so glad that she called to check in on me. She was amazing with that. So I wake up to the phone call and I'm like, it stopped. It's not leaking as bad as it was. And she was saying, well, I still think you should go in and get seen. So I said, okay. But I knew the very next day that I had to go and be with my little nieces for virtual learning. So I said, I'll go, when I get a chance. I didn't think that nothing was wrong. So I continue on about my business. I go on to my sister's house to help with the children. And I get there and I noticed that I hadn't felt my baby moved all day. I hadn't felt him move. I hadn't felt anything. So I'm like, maybe the baby's just asleep. So I just kind of went on about my day, and it was about 6:30 when I was headed back home, and I noticed that I still hadn't felt any movement. So of course, all of these, alarms are going off in my mind, and I noticed that I hadn't seen any bleeding. So I was like, well, maybe nothing's wrong. I'm not bleeding. So I decided to go home, take a nap, just kind of rest my mind for a minute because it had been on my mind all day. So I go home, I take a nap, maybe like an hour goes by with me taking this nap, and I wake up to a mess of blood. So now I'm like, it's time for me to go to the doctor. So I finally tell my husband, and he has his reservations because he's like, well, you've bled before and they said everything was fine, so maybe everything is still okay. So I go to the hospital alone because I'm still thinking too that everything is fine. When I get to the hospital, the bleeding gets worse. It gets really, really heavy to the point to where I am now bleeding through my clothes. Immediately, I knew in the back of my mind that the baby was not gonna make it, but I wouldn't allow myself to fully come to terms with that. I was sitting in the waiting room for maybe an hour and a half. I didn't get seen till like 8:30, and I was sitting there, and the whole time I was sitting there, I was contracting. So I feel these cramps, and I'm like, I'm gonna pass my baby today. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this other pregnant lady who's obviously like very far along in her pregnancy, and she looked like she's about ready to give birth, and I'm literally sitting here in labor. So they rush me back to the room and they see that I'm covered in blood, and they tell me that, it's not looking great. And at this point, like I said, I'm still not really coming to terms with the fact that I'm actually experiencing a miscarriage. So they get me into the delivery room, and I want to say within maybe 15 minutes of them getting me on this bed and getting IVs in me, that I passed my child. So now, mind you, this is during COVID. So my husband was not really allowed upstairs. So I was by myself. I finally called him and I let him know what's going on. At this point, I'm numb. I'm in a state of disbelief, and I'm just out of it. So I call him, I let him know what's going on, and I tell him that he needs to get up here immediately. And our car wasn't working at the time, so he had to find a way to get up there. So he paid someone to bring him. And by the time he gets there, sitting there with the baby on my chest, and I lose it. I just break down because I'm just like, everything that we had worked so hard for almost 6 years had just kind of been taken away from me in a couple of hours. And that was hard to deal with, and I didn't know how to really process that. And I went through a lot of different emotions, mainly anger. I was upset with myself, and I was upset with God, and I was upset with anybody I can be upset with, anybody who I can pass this blame on to. I tried, because I just wanted that hurt off of me. So I remember we was in a hospital and we get into this little heated argument. Mainly because emotions were high. We both had just lost something that we both wanted, and emotions were extremely high. So I said some things that I probably shouldn't have said, and he reacted the way that he should have, and um, that just caused like a rift. So we're going through all of this, and this is happening, and we have our little disagreement. And so I tell him to go home. I'm just like, at this point, I don't want to argue with you. I just lost something that I thought that I would never be able to do, and I just lost that. And the last thing I want to do is fight with you about, who I called first or what was going on, or that's the last thing I want to do, because I'm still in my feelings at this point. I'm like, had you would have just came, I would have never had to call you. You would have already been here. So I'm still feeling the ways about that. And so we passed the baby. The baby is here, and now I have to pass my placenta. So I have all of these nurses standing around me and people reaching inside of me to pull things out, and it's just very uncomfortable. And I'm laid on this bed, and it's just not a very comfortable experience at all. So they finally get the placenta out of me, and they running all of these different type of tests on me just to make sure everything is okay. And I'm still not coming to terms with the fact that all of this stuff is happening. I'm just in a state of, um, I'm just numb at this point. I just don't think that none of this stuff is real. I think I'm dreaming. So I want to say maybe 3 hours after all of this has happened, I have to use the bathroom. I have to really go to the bathroom. And so that moment is when it hit me, because when I got up and I saw all of that blood, and I looked over in the little bassinet that they gave me for my baby, and I saw my baby there, it hit like a ton of bricks. Like, I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders at that moment. And I could not deal. I just could not. I just couldn't. So my husband helps me to the bathroom. I use the bathroom. I get back to the bed, and I am sobbing uncontrollably. And he's trying to console me, and nothing he is saying is working at this point. Nothing nobody is saying is working at this point. Because I'm just like, y'all don't understand. You don't understand the amount of hurt I feel and guilt I felt for, you know, it wasn't just me that was excited about this baby. I had told everybody. Everybody was excited for us, and to have to make all of these phone calls and tell them this news, which it was too much. So I decided to send out a text, and I let that be that. And the next day, they kept us overnight, so I didn't get ready to go home until like 7 o'clock that morning. So when I came home, it was just like a different feel for me, because when I walked through that door, I was no longer pregnant, and I had baby stuff at home, clothes and shoes, and I was making my baby shopping list on Amazon and all of this stuff I was getting ready for, and now I just kind of had to forget about it. So the first day of getting home was tough. It was tough. I think I woke up every 15 minutes and just cried, uncontrollably just cried. And it was tough on my husband because he didn't know how to console me. He's never really seen me cry in the 6 years that we've been together. He's never really seen me cry like that. Um, so that was tough for him too. And he just kept telling me, we're going to get through this. We're going to make it. We're going to get through this. And I never knew that I could fall in love with him all over again. At that moment when I needed him the most, he was there. He was there 100%. And I just felt like this is it. Like, this is really my soulmate. If there was any other time that I had questioned whether or not, we should be doing this, if we was going to make it, if any questions about my relationship, all of that went out the window the day after I lost my son, because I'm like, he was there and he didn't have to be. So, that was great. He really helped me recover. But like I said, that first day was tragic. The second day was just as bad. I remember waking up, and I kept waking up because when I was pregnant, I would always wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning for some reason. I don't know why, but I would always do it. And so the second day after we lost our son, I remember waking up around that same time, and I just kept on saying, why? Why me? Why me? So many people in this world have children that don't deserve them, Lord. Why me? Why did you take mine? So I remember asking that question, and getting like a heap of phone calls from people trying to just make sure that I was okay. I was definitely in a bad headspace. I had contemplated taking my own life. Um, and I didn't feel like there was no other way to recover from what was going on. So I was not able to be left alone for a certain amount of time. He just would not leave me by myself. He just wanted to make sure that I didn't do anything crazy, and I'm very thankful for that. Because I didn't want to act on temporary emotions, something that could change my life, take my life, and change everybody else's life around me. So I'm glad that he was with me through that whole process. So it took maybe a week for me to actually get out of my house and actually try to be around people and um, talk about just a little bit, talk about what was going on with me. I still wasn't fully ready to disclose everything that happened because it had only been a week. And in that week, it seemed like time had just completely stopped. Like, I had no sense of time, no sense of direction. It just seemed like the world had completely stopped for me. But yet the world was continuing for everybody around me. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to cope with the fact that everybody was going on about their day. And I just had the worst day of my life. And no one seemed to give a fuck. So that was tough. But after week one, things got a little bit better after I started, pushing myself to get out the house and actually be around people. But seeing people who was pregnant, and that's still a huge trigger for me to see somebody that's pregnant. And especially if they are due around the same time that I was due, it's a huge trigger for me. Like, my sister has a best friend and I love her like a sister too. And me and her were pregnant at the same time, and her baby was due, like, I think either a day before mine or a day after mine. And I have my moments where I'm just like, I want to be happy for her. I do, because I love her like she's my sister. But it's a trigger point for me. It's triggering to see her. And it ain't nothing that she did personally. And I always try to make sure that I'm not being, um, what's the word? That I'm not being dismissive to her, because she's done nothing to me. It's just the fact that, she's carrying a boy and I was carrying a boy, and she's making it through her pregnancy, and I lost mine so early on. So I don't really want to be in that type of company at the moment. And so, I try to stay away from pregnant women as much as I can. And so now we're in a month of, we're a month in of me losing my son, and I have to go to my best friend's wedding. I still have things that I had already promised people that I was going to do. So I had to fight with myself like hell. I had to fight with myself like hell to go to this wedding, because I was just like, I know when I get there, I'm going to be surrounded by so many babies. And I knew physically and mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of it, I knew that I wasn't strong enough to deal with that on my own. So I basically forced my husband to go to Florida with me for a week so that I could have an emotional support system, so that I wouldn't bring my storm to rain on her parade, because she deserved her day and I didn't want to be the reason or the person who fucked it up for her. But that trip was rough for me because, like I said, I was surrounded by babies at this point. I was surrounded by pregnant women. So that was a trigger for me. The whole time I was there, I was drunk. From the time we landed in Florida, from the time we left, I was drunk the whole entire time. So that's basically how I coped. So that's 1 month after the miscarriage. Month two was a little bit easier. Right now we're in month three. After the miscarriage, but month two was a tad bit easier. I was able to, not be as sensitive. I still have my moments. Like a couple weeks ago, recently, I had a really really bad day where I was just like, you know what, today's just not my day. It's not my day. Nothing that I was doing was going right. Everything just kind of seemed like it was just a shit storm. So I was just like, today is just not the day. So I said, maybe I just need to reset. So every now and then I have my moments, but for the most part, I've been getting better. And it took a minute, like I said, and everybody's journey is different. I was only 15 weeks when I lost my son, and I believe in my heart that it was a boy. So we named him Addison Michael, and he's named after his dad and his granddad, which is my father. And yeah, so I called myself writing this little book for him. And I've only shown it to my husband, and I'm the only one who's seen it outside of him. Um, but it's just a dedication to my son, for me to know that he was here and his life mattered. And even though he left this world too soon, he was still here. I have my moments where I forget, not necessarily forget, but I try not to think about it so that I'm not in a depressing state of mind. But I have great news, hopefully. So stay tuned for the next video and we'll talk about that. Thank you. Yeah, have a good one.